Our second featured speaker tonight is Matt DeBergalis. Originally a kernel hacker, Matt also founded and ran ActBlue, which is the largest political fundraising platform in the world. ActBlue has raised over $950 million for candidates and political groups nationwide. Currently, Matt is a co-founder of the Meteor project, and tonight he'll tell us about Meteor 1.3 and what lies beyond. So everybody, please welcome Matt.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks. I'm one of the founders of the Meteor project, and I wanted to take some time tonight to talk about Meteor 1.3, which is coming very soon, our biggest release ever. We're really proud of what's in there, but I also wanted to just talk a bit about the bigger picture, where we see the platform headed over the next 6 to 12 months, why we've gone in some of the directions we have. Very happy to take questions at the end, and I hope I can give you a sense of what we're thinking here and how we see the trends in Meteor development and JavaScript development playing out and what we can do to help advance that cause. Let me just ask, I see a lot of new faces. How many people are current Meteor developers in the room today? So most of you, but not everyone. That's great. Well, as I go, I'll try to give you the context, and we'll paint a bit of a picture about modern JavaScript app development and what we see going on. So, if you haven't been using Meteor, we have since Meteor 1.0, a bit over a year ago, done 2 other major releases of Meteor. So we had in early 2015 a Meteor release that supports development on Windows machines as the flagship edition, and then a Meteor 1.2 in the fall of last year that added initial support for React and Angular as additional view layers. And that's an investment we've continued on over the past few months, which leads us to where we are today with Meteor 1.3. So there's really 4 themes that I wanted to focus on today as we look ahead for the platform. And the first one I want to begin with is larger apps. So when we started with Meteor, our focus was on what's the quickest path to getting an application up and running. All of us as developers had struggled with this, where whether you're a beginner or an expert, it's just incredibly frustrating how long it takes to write a JavaScript app. And part of that is because the tooling isn't what you'd like in terms of its maturity. Part of that is the incredible fragmentation of JavaScript in terms of all the libraries, the pace of development of those libraries, the number of choices you're assaulted with as you sit down to build an app. And whether you're a large team building something that you're going to invest in for years, or a hacker that just wants to throw something together over the weekend to scratch an itch, it's incredibly demoralizing to spend your first hour or day or week sifting through what really ought to be routine decisions. And we took that philosophy and we worked very hard to craft a development experience that from start to finish, from the first command you type with curl pipe sh, where you don't have to go fetch all those different libraries and dependencies, all the way through a one command deploy to the cloud so that app is up and running and you don't have to be frustrated with all of the mechanics of running a modern WebSocket-based app. And put that into a whole development experience that was enjoyable, that felt good. But what we've learned over the last year is we need to look past that, and we need to ask a bigger set of questions when you start building larger applications. And Meteor is in use at some really large companies now. IKEA uses Meteor in 20 some odd countries to track customer satisfaction. Mazda uses Meteor. The PGA Tour uses Meteor. These are much larger investments with larger teams. And so what we're finding is some of what made that first week enjoyable with Meteor ends up being a bit of an impediment as you grow into your 100th module, or your app that has 455 Blaze templates. And the first one was fun, and the 100th one wasn't so bad, but you're running out of globals, and when you add that 11th developer, it's like, So a lot of what we're doing here in Meteor 1.3 and beyond is about getting rid of that and moving to a structure for an application that's much more about being explicit and having the tools in place so that a larger team can make great forward progress over months and years with an app. And some of that's going to mean, to be frank, you're going to type more lines of code in new versions of Meteor. Some of those magical lines that did 4 things at once are going to get broken out into separate explicit imports or publications or queries so that you have an easier way of destructuring that app into independent parts, independent components, independent modules. So the big thing, the queen feature of Meteor 1.3 that takes us in that direction is built-in absolute 100% standard compliant support for ECMAScript 2015 modules. We could not be happier with where the language landed on this, and in fact, we have one of the members of the core development team, Ben Newman, is our representative on TC39, which is the ECMAScript standards body. We have been really excited to find a way to bring the value of ECMAScript 2015 modules to Meteor without changing the way that your current Meteor app works. So code's going to look something like this. You're going to be able to write, and if you haven't seen ES 2015, by the way, JavaScript's changed a fair bit in the last couple years. So we have classes. That's convenient. We've got syntax for setting multiple values coming from a function or from an import statement. But the big thing I want to show you here is you're going to be able to use in your applications and in your packages explicit ECMAScript style import and export commands. And while this is incrementally adoptable, meaning you don't have to touch your application code in 1.3, it'll still work the way it does today, and you can start module by module, piece by piece, converting over to this style, our recommendation is that you should go in that direction. So everything we do, from the guidance we give you in the Meteor guide, which I'll talk about in a bit, to the way that we've implemented testing in Meteor 1.3, these are all going to revolve around an assumption that applications are going to move to this modular scheme. And here's an example of what I mean by more lines of code and more explicit control over how your app works. This is actually taken from our current version of the to-dos example in Meteor 1.3. And if you go all the way down the path of modules, what you end up with is a single file. This is the main.js file for the new to-dos example that runs on the server. It is the only file in this app that is automatically loaded by Meteor when you run Meteor. So if you put the rest of your Meteor JavaScript files in the right place in your application structure, in our case under an imports directory, it's lazy loaded, and it only gets loaded into the server environment or the client environment once you explicitly import it. And so what you can see here is essentially the top of that import tree. And if you follow those files, you'll see, for example, the last one has a whole set of API definitions where we import the various publications that are going to drive the to-dos app. So it's incrementally adoptable, and we have some guidance in our guide for the specific structure you want to use here. One particular thing that we're happy to wave goodbye to is the practice of using private packages, private, essentially, Atmosphere packages within your Meteor application directory. That's definitely an inferior approach. It's much heavier weight and clunky compared to just using lazy loaded files. Most people were using that structure to do 2 things. One was a modularity improvement, but the other, of course, was to control load order. So here's your load order solution, right? Not only do you explicitly import files, but you can type that in whatever order you like. What could be better? So if any of you have been struggling with naming your files with A, or like, 001, like it's, Unix in 1998 or whatever, there's a really simple, clean solution. And there's a theme here, which is the language is getting better. So, Meteor developers aren't the only people that are running into the frustration of trying to use a scripting language that was written in like a week and a half and never intended really for large applications. everyone has run into these challenges, and what you're going to find in Meteor 1.3 and beyond is that we're able to leverage a lot of that advancement in JavaScript because it's very much in line with the desire we have to make Meteor a better platform for large application development. And this is one example of that. Rather than having a specific story for load order in Meteor, we can lean on more and more of the standards that come with the language and the standard use of JavaScript to drive the way that application works. So we couldn't be more excited about that. And modules, of course, opens the door to what may well be the most requested feature from our commercial customers, which is built-in support for both unit and integration tests in Meteor. So this is also in Meteor 1.3. We have based this, again, on standard JavaScript ecosystem technology. Our preferred language, for example, for writing these tests is Mocha, but you can bring in other testing systems as you like. And what I've described here is one of the unit tests from that same to-dos example. You can immediately see what's going on, right? We're going to have a factory to create a new to-do, and we're essentially testing that our model object is setting timestamps the right way. So you've got two options in Meteor 1.3 for doing your tests. Unit tests, the way that works is the Meteor tool, when run in test mode, will load none of your project. So we're taking advantage here of the module structure and the fact that files are lazy loaded. So we're not going to bring in any of the automatic loading that you get with traditional Meteor. And then your test file is going to manually import just the pieces that it needs. So for example, in a unit test where you're testing the to-do model, you're probably going to import that one file or that one module. You can also, because ES 2015 modules support both default exports and named exports, you can import special exports that are really only designed for white box testing, right? So you can pick out symbols that you don't want to be exported when you're running your app in normal mode. Those are internal to the object, but they are available when you're writing tests to pull in that internal element of the module. The other way you can do testing is in an integration mode, and the difference here is that the loader will run the application code as it normally runs in development mode. And then on top of that, whatever testing files you've written. So now you have access to not just an individual module that you import, but the whole Meteor system. You can test end-to-end, reactivity, publications. You can write tests of Blaze templates, for example, and I have such an example here on the screen. All of that's available in that testing mode. So there's two different ways to test your app in Meteor 1.3. And then, of course, for end-to-end testing, there are a number of solutions that we've documented in the guide that let you run inside of a virtual browser or other techniques to drive the full application stack for those of you doing end-to-end testing. Here again, incrementally adoptable in the sense that you don't have to switch all of this to the new style. We do have some guidance again in the Meteor guide about how to make this transition, but this is an instance where we recommend that you move very aggressively in this direction, both because it's the cleanest way for us to provide stable testing, as well as the best way for you to access the whole ecosystem of JavaScript testing tools that are compatible with the ES 2015 module structure that we've brought. There's some more stuff in 1.3. We have a lot of work here on mobile. This is actually an area that we're really excited about because we have revamped quite a bit of the original Cordova-based mobile infrastructure that comes with Meteor and lets you publish your app not just for the browser, but also as an installable application that runs on iOS and Android devices. So for those of you on iOS, we have really great news. WK WebView support is now built into Meteor 1.3. Some of you may have seen at a DevShop talk not so long ago an application from Handsoft where they showed off how they use Meteor both on the desktop and on the mobile device, and they talked a fair bit about having to use WK WebView to get the frame rate and the animation performance that they were looking for in their mobile application. we have brought that same technology now into the platform as a whole so that you can take advantage of essentially the much better JIT performance that you get running JavaScript in that style of container on iOS. We've also got, as part of this update, all new versions of the Cordova plugins brought up to the latest versions. And besides all of that, new native wrappers for both iOS and Android. And the native wrappers are what allow us to offer a more robust hot code push story in Meteor 1.3. So in previous versions of Meteor, the way hot code push on mobile works is that your application code is uploaded to the mobile device. The JavaScript on the device, unfortunately, is commingled with the JavaScript that you've written. If you have an error in your JavaScript, sometimes that error is such that the actual loader, right, the harness that surrounds your code, ends up in a non-working state. And by rewriting that in Swift and in Java for the two mobile platforms, we now have a wrapper that is isolated from your JavaScript code. That means if you push a version that doesn't work, the wrapper can detect that and fall back. And it means you can recover with an additional hot code push. We've also taken the time to implement higher performance hot code pushes. So for example, we can now do incremental file updates, meaning that your typical update, if you've changed a CSS file, for example, doesn't have to include a download of the whole application bundle. We can actually do that on a file-by-file basis. And in many cases, that leads to a vastly faster app update. I mentioned the guide. This is something we're really excited about. The guide is already available at guide.meteor.com for Meteor 1.2, but we've been making a massive investment in this in line for Meteor 1.3. And what we've been able to do with it is pull in many of the really great Atmosphere packages and the other things that come in the JavaScript ecosystem. So for example, I have up on the screen some guidance we give you about your schema design, and this uses simple schema, which certainly I think a lot of the Meteor community is already using. We've standardized on that as a way of using model descriptions in your app. Not only is this stuff in the written guide, it's also now part of the example applications that we ship in 1.3. So you'll see the use of these third-party packages and this suggested application structure throughout everything that we do, including those sample apps that you can work from or use as a guide for how to build your own application. Okay, so that's the first theme. It's about robust mobile support. It's about modules so that you can structure your app, especially as you have more developers. It's about all the things you want as you grow that app from the first couple developers making the initial investment to that application with a larger team. The second big theme, and I've touched on this and hinted at it, is a much closer alignment with the JavaScript ecosystem. And this is vital because there's so much happening in JavaScript, much of it just in the last year or two, for example, that we really want to bring into the Meteor platform. And we want Meteor to be the best way to use all of those technologies. We'll give you some guidance about when we think it's best or what we think might be most appropriate. But certainly some of the older versions of Meteor, you faced a difficult choice where certain things were easy, but then, maybe pulling in the latest and greatest thing in NPM, you ended up doing more work than you'd like. So we're attacking that head on, and we're starting with better NPM integration. So in Meteor 1.3, you can type npm install. That will drop a node modules directory right into your application. We treat that node modules directory just like we treat the ES25 or 2015 modules that I talked about earlier. In other words, those JavaScript files are not automatically loaded. No more putting your npm modules under public or all these other hacks people used to do. And instead, you can import directly from those packages. The way we've implemented modules, by the way, is under the covers that's done using CommonJS for back compat with Node and other environments that don't actually support ES 2015 natively. So you can use existing NPM packages and then pull that in and use the symbols they export right alongside the Meteor code you're writing and the standard Meteor packages that you've been relying on from the beginning. And we're running with this fairly aggressively. So our guidance, for example, in Meteor 1.3, when you're using React, is to npm install. That way, you're up to date with the latest that's coming from the rapidly moving, to say the least, React ecosystem. We also would recommend now that the packages that are wrapped in Atmosphere, so for example, wrapper packages for Moment, we would recommend instead that you npm install the upstream package provided by the author of that particular tool. So for Moment, for Segment, things like that, we definitely see a shift from the Atmosphere wrapper packages to the npm packages. The npm support will cover virtually every server package for npm. The one issue there is around binary packages. We've done a lot of work in Meteor, of course, to pre-build those binary packages so that you don't need a tool chain on your development machine. But when you npm install, that's not how it works. So you just want to be careful about how you're using npm packages that have a binary dependency. One option, of course, is to continue to wrap it in an Atmosphere package so that you get the advantage of the build on publish. On the client, it's a little more complicated. Some of this stuff will work right out of the box. Some of this stuff we have guidance for you in the guide, depending on whether that package is using certain types of assets that it expects to export to the client. And that'll be an ongoing piece of work as we move further down this path. But definitely for a lot of these very common things that people are using in their system, I think you'll find that this works really well for you, and we're excited to go in this direction. And I don't think it's a huge surprise at this point, but what we see over the coming year is a complete transition to that NPM ecosystem, a alignment of Atmosphere packages and NPM packages. There's a lot of work to do there. There are some really great features in the way Atmosphere packages work. The way, for example, that we do version dependencies and single package loading is not the same way that NPM would treat multiple versions requested of a package. And I mentioned the binary pre-build that we've put a lot of effort into. So we will look at ways to carry that over, but our goal is to end on an aligned package system so that you don't have to distinguish between those two flavors of packages. And now that NPM is the natural home for not just server JavaScript, but also client-side JavaScript packages, which is something that's happened over the last couple of years, we think it's the right time to bring all of that under that single roof and let you use those in a consistent way in your Meteor application. So look for more on that as we go forward. And what comes out of that is a really exciting opportunity, which is a new look at the build system. So the current build system in Meteor, how many people have noticed longer build times recently in Meteor? I think it's fair to say that's not the best part of the development experience at this point. And a lot of that is because the current Meteor build tool has grown to include a whole array of concerns that date back all the way to the Mesozoic era. The transition to NPM will let us leave some of that behind, and we see an opportunity for a fresh look at a full stack client server and mobile capable JavaScript build tool. What's really exciting is that we've started having some conversations with other JavaScript communities that are starting to see the same problem and the same need for a standard build tool for large-scale JavaScript applications. We're moving beyond the days when it's exciting to put together your whole tool chain and still not have half the features you want, or have to treat the JavaScript that's destined for your client differently from the JavaScript destined for your server. So we'll be working with some of those groups. I think there's a very good chance that what we land on is a lightweight, simple, fast as hell build tool that understands how to bring these ES 2015 module-based packages into a full application that has a client component, a server component, a mobile component. Okay, another area where alignment with JavaScript has been in the Meteor news of late is the view layer. So we are really excited about what's possible now in the modern Meteor platform with view layers. And Meteor 1.3 supports 4 of them. I would say the 4 really popular view layers. We have Blaze, of course. We have Angular 1 that we've supported for a long time thanks to Uri Goldstein's work on Meteor Angular. And then, of course, with Meteor 1.2, we started our support for React and for Angular 2. They're all good choices. And I'm not sure we get the Walter Cronkite Award for Clear Communication when we talked about our plans for Blaze late last year and into this year. So let me lay it out for you as straight as I can and the direction that we see this going. These are all great choices for a Meteor 1.3 app. We support all 4 of them. That won't change. We're not deleting Blaze. I'm not even sure how that's possible in Git. But here's how I see it. There's pluses and minuses to all 4. So if you have an existing application built in Blaze, you're fine, is the first point. You can make a transition if you like down the line to React or Angular 2. I would suggest thinking about that because we see a really bright future for those ecosystems. But Blaze works fine in Meteor 1.3. I showed you, for example, a unit test against a Blaze template. You're OK. If you're starting a new project and it's a project where your goal is fast, maybe it's a weekend project, maybe it's a proof of concept, maybe it's something where it's only going to be a couple developers for a couple weeks and then you're not going to want to invest in that longer, Blaze we still see as a really great way to build an app quickly because it's the product of years and years of not just MDG's work, but also community efforts to build all the full stack components that come along with a view layer. So in Blaze, for example, you get one command that gives you a login system with all the UI and the full stack methods and components that sit below that. That's not the case with these other systems, unfortunately. So if that's your goal, if speed is your goal, that's our recommendation, and we have a whole set of guidance around this in the guide for Meteor 1.3. If, on the other hand, you're looking for an app where you see a much larger investment, you imagine having a team of developers, you imagine months or years of work that go into that app, and frankly, you're prepared for a higher startup cost, but potentially a lower maintenance cost as that app grows large, I would consider a React or an Angular 2 strategy for your view layer. Those systems have been designed to have that more modular component-based approach. We think that's the right direction in the long run. Both of them work really, really well in Meteor. Angular 2, for example, really wants you to use TypeScript, and we have great TypeScript support in Meteor 1.3. So you can build an application in Meteor 1.3 with Angular 2, TypeScript, and you're off to the races. We will be giving you guidance in the guide for the best practices and the best packages that round out the whole development experience when you're using those ecosystems. And so in the long run, I see a future where both React and Angular 2 make a lot of sense, and you're not struggling as much as you are today with the lack of some of that built-out full-stack componentry that makes application development in Meteor so pleasant. So that's the story. All of them are reasonable choices. I didn't mention Angular 1. I think it's fair to say if you're building a new app today, that's probably not the sensible choice, but we do have a lot of users on Angular 1. And there again, that's something that we will continue to support as you go forward. OK. So NPM support, view layer support, these crack open the door for, I think, something really important, which is just talking about a more open platform in general for Meteor. And this has been, I think, a fair critique of some of what we've done in the past. This, for example, is the A through part of B if you look at all the packages that are under the Meteor/Meteor repository. And I think it's fair to say that's probably too many packages in one place. Of course, all the issues, all the pull requests are commingled because of that. And we have found that it takes a great deal of investment on a contributor's part to even be able to get to the place where they're ready to make a pull request against this whole monolithic system, right? When they're only interested maybe in, say, the OAuth bindings for Facebook because Facebook, yet again changed their APIs. So we are, this very moment, doing some exciting work to break these packages out of the Meteor/Meteor repository into their own repositories. We're going to start, I believe, early next week with Blaze and the accounts packages so that it's much easier for you to contribute issues and pull requests, and so that we can invite external contributors to help do more and more of the maintenance and management of some of those packages. So gone are the days when all of this needs to be sort of a monolithic system that all routes through the same MDG process. We're looking forward to a much more diverse ecosystem of contributors and authors against these packages. And we have some exciting news on that front. We've been working, for example, with Rocket Chat, who have been doing some work to break part of the account system apart in preparation for bringing SQL to the platform. Meteor, who's done a whole bunch of work on the Blaze front, is going to work with us on some of that management of the Blaze package and its related parts. So look for these changes early next week in the repository. And we see a whole set of opportunities here as we grow out the number of top-level repositories and packages, and again, sort of make nothing special about the way that some of these things work. One other example of what you'll see in 1.3 with Blaze is currently it's very difficult to use custom versions of some of these packages in Meteor. If they're part of the official Meteor release, those versions are essentially pinned to the Meteor release. We're going to change that so that it will be easier for you to build a stock Meteor app, but then perhaps use a different version of the Blaze templates or some of the account systems. So we're doing the plumbing reroutes in the way that the release is built and the manifests are created to make it possible to have a broader set of options around that and a more diverse set of forks of some of these packages or versions of these packages. Okay, and finally, the one I'm really excited to talk about, and if you've been following the Meteor forums or some of the announcements we've done recently, we are making a big investment in data in 2016. I think for a lot of us, the part of the Meteor stack that just still boggles the mind at how great it is and how much time it saves us is the ability to go from a database query on the server to having that data available in the client, writing very little code, and being able to manipulate that data, not just read that data and have it keep in sync from what the server has done, but also the ability to write an optimistic UI so that you can write a client-side mutation and have your screen update responsively the minute a user does something, yet still all be resolved with eventually, on the other side of a very slow network, whatever it was that the server decided to do. And we want that to be available not just on Mongo, where it is today, but with all the databases that people have asked us for. So SQL, Redis, REST endpoints, and the like. We want to bring all of that to the Meteor platform. We also want to make that incrementally adoptable, just like everything else. So we've announced just the last few days the Apollo data stack, which is our new rev of the live data, Meteor, data synchronization stuff that we all know and love, designed from the ground up to support modern databases and to support REST endpoints in addition to Mongo. Here's how this will work. Apollo is going to be a standalone set of packages. So all of this stuff ties together. It's written in modern ECMAScript. It's published into NPM. You can NPM install the Apollo packages into your Meteor 1.3 app. And you'll be able to use this side by side with your existing publications and subscriptions. So you can move one component at a time, one piece of your app at a time. You might want to take one part of the app where reactivity in the current system doesn't work quite the way you want and try out the new things we're doing with Apollo. And over time, we hope that this will become the standard data stack that can be used for all the workload. in a Meteor app. But we want to get there step by step. It also means, because this is published into NPM, that you'll be able to use this on its own. So for those of you who aren't using Meteor today, but you're excited about some of what Meteor does, but maybe you're not ready to make that whole switch, or you're not starting a new app, and so it just doesn't make sense, Apollo is something we very explicitly want to bring to you as an addition to your existing investments in Angular or React and microservices, so that you can have the same data sync and the same rich ability to drive an intelligent, modern, thick client on top of all of the existing investments you've made. And we're basing this on GraphQL. So GraphQL is, for us, a database agnostic ORM of sorts that allows us to describe how a client's components need to request data from the server. And what we're bringing to the GraphQL ecosystem is the knowledge that we've gained over the last 4 years about how to do optimistic UI, how to do reactivity, so reactive GraphQL queries, how to do all of this with a reasonable amount of code that a typical developer would want to type. Those of you maybe who've dug into modern GraphQL, there's some sharp edges, and we see an opportunity to productize that in a sense, to polish that so that it's something available for a typical application and a typical application's needs. And in terms of what that's going to get us, well, it's a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to get us SQL support, which I think is the real top-line feature. But there's some other things, too, that we think are really important that we hear from a lot of our larger-scale Meteor users. We want to build this to be scalable from the ground up in a way that wasn't quite true of live data. So, for example, in Apollo, it is your option which parts of your data queries are reactive. Sometimes you don't want all your data to be reactive. That can drive the user interface in a funny way, and it can also, of course, come with a high cost. So you'll be able to choose that. Another thing in Apollo is that the reactivity is always something that you can put under manual control. So rather than relying on the intricacies of how a database recomputes its query result the way that it works in Meteor Live Data today, you'll be able to write explicit JavaScript so that if you want, you can have specific control over exactly what sorts of updates drive which reactive changes to your data. And we hope that will bring a more understandable scaling property so that we can reason about these applications and these query workloads in a way that's been very difficult with the existing live data system that we have. There's a lot here as well, being able to talk to multiple backends, multiple microservices at once, essentially solving the client-side join problem so that a component in your client-side JavaScript can be asking for data that's actually coming from more than one data source on the server. You might have, for example, data in your Mongo database that gets joined with data coming from a REST microservice that you've built, and all of that queried with a single client query and made available to the client with a single GraphQL response. And so that lets you write efficient code on the client, but still take advantage of all the modern trends around breaking your backends apart into multiple microservices, scaling those independently, connecting to third-party microservices, using multiple databases where you can pick the right workload for each of those different data stores. We actually have some early contributors to our project. New Spring Church, for example, is a big Meteor shop, and they've been helping to contribute to some of the backend database drivers because they have a whole fleet of different databases that they've used for different parts of their app based on the kind of workload that's in play. So everything from SQL to Mongo to GraphDBs, all of that fits very nicely into this architecture, and we see it as a way to bring all those into the Meteor stack. I mentioned Rocket Chat. They're also helping us on this. I said before that they're looking at accounts in SQL, and we see an opportunity here to bring all that together so that the Apollo project isn't just something coming from us, but it's a community project that really brings together a lot of the work that some of our most advanced users have been tackling in different ways, and the JavaScript ecosystem as a whole naturally developers at Facebook and at some of the other companies that are making big investments in GraphQL and the stack that is tied to that. All of that we think can come together and see the Apollo project as an opportunity to have an open collaboration, an open design process. And so I'd implore all of you who are interested in this to go to the Apollo Stack GitHub repository. There are design documents there. There are design discussions happening there. And we'd really love to have your participation as we map out the different parts of the project and how all that's going to fit together. So those are the themes that are really on my mind for the moment. There's an opportunity to do some great things for larger applications. There's a really great opportunity over the next few months to align Meteor with the modern JavaScript ecosystem, the modern language features, the modern ways of using different sorts of packages. There is, I think, a real desire in the Meteor community, and one that we share, to make Meteor a more open platform, both in technical terms, in terms of mixing and matching parts and incrementally using them, and also in social terms, in ways that let us work more closely with those of you who are sending us ideas and pull requests and want to participate in the project in that way. And finally, as I said, the investment we're making in Apollo we see as the root of a really exciting opportunity to drive the data synchronization needs on these modern clients. This is, in some sense, the heart and soul of Meteor, and we could not be more excited to bring SQL and these other features to the platform over the coming months. So thank you. Happy to take questions, and would love to hear your thoughts on Meteor and the platform. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Can I do that? OK. Yes, sir.
Yeah, nice job. My question is around Galaxy. I think one of the compelling things about Meteor is that you can kind of growth hack an app and start small. I'm wondering, have you guys thought about, well, if you have this sort of $20 a month developer version, and then you have this Uber version, is there any thought to allowing people to, in the same way the platform scales, to allow the infrastructure to scale?
Yeah, the question is, Galaxy, is there what's our thinking around scaling smoothly from the developer version that we've been offering at the lower end of the market up through, we have an enterprise product that costs more. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see running an app in the cloud as just part and parcel of the development experience, and it's not enough to make it really easy to write that app and then just kind of leave you to have to solve all the DevOps challenges that come with that in your own way. So we've always seen that as part of the story. What we're trying to do with Galaxy is look for a way that we want to balance that first experience so that it's very, very easy to run that app initially with the ability to grow that app, not just in terms of how much CPU it needs, but in terms of everything that comes with a larger app at a larger organization with multiple developers, multiple deployers. You're going to start to want, tie-ins to your CI workflow. You're going to want, connections into different services that the app is using. So I would expect some of the same thing that I got at earlier with the platform. We may, for example, find that giving you more explicit control over where your database runs and tie-ins to some of the companies that are offering those databases is really important. And there's a trade-off between making that easy without having to type any commands versus giving you control over how you want that database to behave or what kind of database you want behind it. So the set of questions we're looking at are just about how do we let it grow in terms of the app, because it's more than just clicking the button to run more containers. I mean, you can do that today, and really the whole set of questions around the parts that come with it. I heard rough timeframes and will be available, which are my two favorite things to hear, but I missed the meat of it.
To disable the React developments.
Oh, when will you be able to turn off reactivity is the question. Yeah, so here's the deal with Apollo. We're very early in the project. If you go to that repository, you'll find a couple of packages that we've started working on that are part of the story. But Apollo is a whole family of technologies. So it's everything from how do you bring in a caching GraphQL client that binds to React or Angular or whatever your view layer is. There's also questions like, what are the drivers for each of those databases on the server side? There are questions like, where does the actual GraphQL server run? Then there's a whole set of questions around, how does reactivity work in this architecture? Because we want that to be a separable component so that you can scale it differently and so on and so forth. So it's definitely too early to say what the calendar looks like for those parts. The good news, though, is that I would expect the direction this goes is more like layering reactivity on top of the initial versions. So you'll be able to use the Apollo technology very early on to drive a modern UI, and then we'll make it easier and easier for you to have parts of those queries be reactive, and initially that may take more code on your part, and then over time we can make that simpler and simpler. So for example, reactive queries aren't that hard, but optimistic UI of reactive queries turns out to be the PhD level stuff. So I would look at it more like incremental in the other direction, where you start with simple, basic, fast, scalable, and then you layer on which parts of your UI do you want to have that character. And I think something we'll be trying to do as we go is give you the insights you need to understand what the incremental cost of that reactivity is so that you can make intelligent decisions about where exactly to sprinkle it into the app. Yes?
Do you have any plans to update Node 0, 12, or 4.0?
Node 4. Thank you for asking. So yes, we do. We're not going to do Node 4 in Meteor 1.3, and the reason is just because there is essentially it's a new target for binary package builds. So moving to Node 4 is going to require that authors of Meteor packages republish for the new binaries. I would expect it will be very shortly after 1.3. Okay. And we're excited about Node 4 and some other version dependencies as well, because they are the LTS versions from the upstream vendors. MongoDB, for example, same story, where we're really eager to update the Mongo driver. So we've decided to scope that out of 1.3, but it's I think it's fair to say it's at the top of the list right after. And we'll just want to coordinate with the package authors and give a little bit of window of time. Yeah.
Time for one more question.
One more question. Yes?
Do the alternative view layers work side by side? Can you sort of mix and match?
Do the alternative view layers work side by side? They absolutely do. Yeah, thanks for asking. So incremental doesn't just mean the data layer or converting over to modules. It also includes running parts of your app with Blaze and parts of your app with React, for example. We've been through this, by the way. So we've had apps written in Blaze, as have some of our customers that are starting to make the transition. So one thing that's very important to us, and I love this question, is when we make these transitions in the platform, one thing we've heard loud and clear from the community is the transitions are great. The new stuff is awesome, but it's really helpful to have a transition plan. And that's our one of our motivations for the guide. And it also drives some technical work that we can do to make all that line up. So yeah, I'd really like to see a path forward, for example, where you're on Blaze, you're comfortable on Blaze, but you potentially look at one piece of that component model where either you're building a new feature, let's say, and you want to try it in React or as an Angular 2 template, and you can see how that goes. And it definitely can't require a flag day for the whole application. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you again. Cheers.